Very excited to introduce you to Scott Downey. Now, how many of you know Scott or have met him before or heard from him? Okay, so I'm not going to read all this to you because you already know the majority of it. But he is a director for the Center for Food and Agricultural Business and a professor in the Department of Agriculture Economics at Purdue University. I bet the majority of you already knew that. So he joined Purdue full-time in 2000, and I didn't know this, after spending 15 years in the financial services industry. So I got a couple of questions to ask you there afterwards. He is a lead author of Pro Selling, a professional approach to selling in agriculture and other industries. I highly recommend it, especially if you have any young people. It's a great read, and everyone should have one on their shelf as far as I'm concerned. He received his bachelor's degree at Purdue in 1985, MBA from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. What a beautiful campus that is. And then he got his doctorate at Purdue University. And the great thing about what he got his doctorate in is going to be what he's talking about today, and that's in consumer behavior. He's been doing this survey for 30 plus years now, and he loves diving deep into the data. And I'll tell you, if you like what you see today at the ARA Management Academy, coming up the first of next year, he can teach your people how to approach these types of producers, okay? He'll give you a little bit of the survey information there, but he'll give you more of an approach that you can use in communicating, how you reach out to them, those type of things. And it's an excellent program, highly recommend it. As you can well imagine, he's won a lot of national teaching awards, and he's lucky enough to be married to Laura, who's also a veterinarian. So he's got everything covered from row crop to animal science. So with that, Scott, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Donnie. You shouldn't applause because you haven't heard me yet. For lunch, you know, you got that food digesting in your belly. It's a perfect time to get a little data dump. We'll try to make it not quite that today, but there is a lot to talk about here, so we'll jump right in. I'm really glad to be here with you. This is one of my favorite to present at and to attend. It's beautiful here. It's a gorgeous day, and I love this hotel. All of that said, yes, as Donnie mentioned, please send people to join us in Arizona where it's warm in January. It's also a great event. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the background at our survey that we do on large farm buying behavior. My areas of research are in three areas. I look at how farmers make buying decisions, how salespeople influence those decisions, and how sales managers maximize the outcomes of those efforts. And over the last year, we've completed all three of those surveys. The sales survey, I will mention just briefly here at the end when I talk about a few key takeaways out of it. But I'll share a little bit about who we heard from this year. Anybody done farmer research recently? It is really hard to get, hopefully it's going to come back. It is really hard to get farmers to respond to surveys today. So we're really pleased that we've at least got a few responses out of that. So we do this study every 4 or 5 years throughout our history of our center. This is the 8th iteration of the study, and we've got about a little over 1,150 responses. It's a national study, and we look at 7 different production categories. So we look at corn and soybeans, we look at wheat, we do a few special crops, potatoes, tomatoes, fruit, nut, and then on the livestock side, we do several categories of livestock dairy, several different levels of production of beef and pork. It's harder and harder to get some of these responses, but I'm really excited about what we've got here. So we try to understand how farmers make buying decisions. It's a kind of a long study. We've got about 60 questions in it. As we move forward, we'll begin a process of trying to weight the data that we got. So let me tell you what I mean by that. We specifically try to understand how large farms make buying decisions. And so we oversample large farmers. So there's more large farmers in our study than exist in the population today. I'll share a little bit of the detail of that here in a minute. We also try to oversample the fruit, nut, vegetable group. Being in the Midwest, we collect a lot of Midwestern responses by nature. We've worked really hard over the last several years to make sure it truly is a national study. We also do a companion study. We ask retail salespeople what they think farmers will say in response to this, and I'll share a little bit of that with you. And then this year, we partnered with Beck Ag to help us collect some qualitative data. What do farmers actually say about some of these things? And it's been a really good partnership. We're really excited about that. So we'll continue that partnership together in the coming year, talking about some of these results. So I'm really pleased about that. The retailer study that we did, we got about 250 responses, most of those from salespeople. The farmer study, we started collecting the data in January, and we collected it through the beginning of summer. A lot of volatility during that time frame. So one of the things I've been doing while you all were eating Thanksgiving dinner, I was looking at, did it matter? And so we didn't see big swings in farmer sentiment over that time period from January to June. There was a little bit, but not a lot, not nearly as much as we got the last time we did the study, which was in January of 2021, right in the midst of COVID, which had its own kind of interesting responses. So, all right, so couple things. So every time we do the study, we try to understand farmer buying decisions, but we also try to understand a few other things. So this time, we tried to understand what are some of the opportunities and threats farmers see today and how do they feel about them. We tried to dig into precision agriculture a little bit, of the reasons for and against adopting precision agriculture, sustainability, novel sales approaches by manufacturers to tie data to products. I'm not going to share all of that today. We just simply don't have enough time to do that, but I will really dig into a couple pieces of that. If you want to, and I saw a few of you doing this already, this QR code will get you early notification for when we make the formal study available online. So it's not out there yet. We have a tradition of putting our themes of this study together, what some of the big buckets are, and it'll cover some of the things I'm going to talk about today, and probably in a little bit more detail in a couple of other areas. So let me jump in with who responded. As I said, we collect data across 7 different major categories, 1,151 farms. Those represent 6 million acres of production and almost 3 million head of livestock. And like I said, it's oversampled with some of the larger folks. To give you a little bit of how this connects, the 2022 census data came out at beginning of November and of this year, and gave the breakdowns of the different farm categories that we use. So these categories haven't been updated since I think 2002 was the last time they changed the categories. So in order to be able to compare farms, with different types of production across different crops and livestock categories. The census data looks at this by gross farm revenue. So we break it out in that same way. And we do that in two ways. We ask farmers to give us a category of where their farm falls within this. And then we also take their production data, and so that we can have some consistency across it, we do some analysis of that to convert that into gross farm income, making some assumptions about prices, so that using some average published prices. And so when we do that, in the census, mid-sized farms, those 350 to $1 million in gross farm revenue, represent about 60% of farms in the U.S. In our sample, it's only about 22%. You can see that the farms that are 5 million and over represent about 5% of U.S. farms. In our study, it's about 24%. That way we get enough responses there that we can really dig into some of what they think, breaking apart a few of those things. So what does that mean in terms of acreage? So for, you can see for, I'll just pick corn and soy just because we have so many of those. That's about 3,300 acres for our large farms, 2,000 acres for commercial, and just under 900 for the mid-size. But there's a big asterisk on there. So what I'm showing you here are the averages, not of those who are, for example, primary corn and soybean. These are any farms with corn and soybean go into those averages. So the true numbers are probably roughly double for the large, 1.5 times the commercial, and about the same for the mid-size, maybe just a little bit under that. So these are really wide deviations that come with these. So the column there with the asterisks tells you on average how many of these categories the different farm types have on their farm. So on average, large farms have about 3 different types of production on the farm. Mid-sized farms have a little over 2. I'll show you this data a little bit later, but there are so many, and you all know this, but so many corn and soybean farmers that we almost can just look at corn and soy and get indications of what everybody else does, because so many dairies have a little bit of row crop with them, cattle, some of the same. Less true in hogs, but you'll see a lot of wheat, cotton, and even some of the fruit, nut, vegetable, and other categories have some of those. A few really interesting things when you look at the age. Usually this is a pretty boring slide because we all know what's the average age of a U.S. farmer? Mid-50s, right? Unless they're large. And if they're large, this is the first time this has happened. They move into the 36 to 49 category. First time in our history that has been the case. So the average farm age is still in that 50 to 64 category if you do the math up there. But it is younger than it has typically been. And again, for those large farms, the majority there are in that 36 to 49 category. And that is changing things, is going to be changing some things. And so that's kind of interesting to us. One of the things about the different size categories, because of our oversampling, most of what I'm going to show you today is going to show this by size category, because we can be pretty confident that when we describe large producers, we're describing large producers. I can't say that all farms would fall into this same category because of our oversampling. But when you see the mid-sized farms there, it's pretty representative of the 350,000 to 1 million farms. And for the commercial, it's pretty representative of the 1 million to 5 million. And then again, the largest 5 million and over. So those are some interesting things. When you look at education, this is not new. Large farms are more educated, no surprise there. Of the 8 iterations of the survey that we've done, every single time we've done the survey, farmers are more educated than they were the time before. And that doesn't change. So I'm really excited about being able to talk a little bit about that. Large farms tend to have more advanced degrees. Not a big surprise. The thing that does stick out just a little bit to me is the number of mid-size farms that have with people with advanced degrees. We don't have data in it in this survey. It's something we're going to add for the next one, is to look at off-farm income. We've looked at that before, and we do that as a separate study, but we need to pull it into this study. I have suspicions that some of those advanced degree mid-sized farms are farming on, I don't know what you call a part-time basis. So, how are farmers making decisions on their farms? This is not buying decisions. This is about how they run their farms. And we've asked, for the last 3 or 4 studies, we've asked farmers questions about what the major functions are within their farming operations that they attribute their success to. So, not a surprise. So this is a ranking question here. And so managing and controlling costs is the biggest factor on the farm that they attribute to their success. Second is production. You might ask yourself, so why would production be second to managing and controlling costs? It's because for the majority of these topics, it's a risky profession for them. And they, as they look at all these different topics, they feel like, look, I'm a good farmer, but there is so much dependent on weather and climate and other factors there that I am able to maximize that. My success comes from my ability to manage and control costs. Managing land, equipment, facilities, important, but those are big dollar investments. Those are hard to make moves on. Managing people, yes, it's an issue in a lot of different areas for a lot of different types of production, but it's primarily a large farm, a little bit in livestock, and a lot in fruit, nut, vegetable, and other issue. And so for the majority of farmers, that's a relatively smaller issue, and you can see it's dead last for almost 60% of farms. And then nearly every farm, no matter what they're raising, feels like a victim when it comes to output prices. And so that's the area they have the least control over. So really what you see here is a measure of risk and control as much as it is truly contributing to success. So I'm going to put this in motion here for a little bit, and what I mean by that is I'm going to flip through back and forth through 3 slides that show you kind of what happens the bigger they are. So the mid-sized farms are showing here. One thing to look at is the managing and controlling costs. As right there, it's 39% for them. When you move to commercial, it's 36%. When you move to large, it's 26%. Interesting, because it's not the way I often hear about it from the field from retailers. So let me do that again. Managing production for mid-size, 29%, commercial, 26%, but it's up again for large. So one of the phenomena that we've kind of observed is that often our large farm responses and our mid-size farm responses have more in common. It's not in every area, but there's several areas where they have more in common than the commercial guys in the middle do. And that may be tied to the education number I showed you a little bit more, but we need to dig in a little bit more to find that out. When you look at, let me back this up here, when you look at managing people, 7% for mid-size, 14% for commercial, and it jumps up for the large. Managing output prices for the large farms is last, And when you look at those that ranked it first, that's only 5% there, 10% for commercial, and then you jump back down on the midsize. Yeah, please.
Could you clarify commercial?
Commercial is 1 million to 5 million in gross farm revenue.
It's just revenue cap.
These are all revenue generated so that we can do the comparisons.
Different ownership.
Yeah. Okay. We also ask growth. So we ask this by saying, all right, how many acres do you farm today across those different commodities? And where do you expect you'll be in 5 years? So it's not a measure of growth. It's a measure of attitude towards growth, because nobody's going to come back and test them to see if they were liars. I mean, if they exaggerate. I mean, if they were accurate in their projections. So we're really collecting growth attitudes here. And so when you observe it that way, you see really big, these are big gaps between the different sizes of farms. But we also had a relatively new phenomena in the numbers in looking at it this way. So usually we've asked questions about growth. When we ask how many acres or head will you be producing 5 years from now, we have a big group that's shrinking, and we have a really big group that says, I'm out of here. And we've never seen that before. I mean, even 10% of large farms. We've not had time yet to dig into that and correlate the getting out or shrinking with age factors. I would hypothesize that many of those getting out would be of that age. But even with that, you've got more of the mid-size leaving than the large, and the no-growth category is relatively the same there. So who's growing? You'll notice that the highest growth category, that's about the highest quartile of growth, roughly. The large farms are showing a lower number there than the others are. Again, my hypothesis is that because the numbers that they put down are planned a bit more. And so rather than being in the highest quartile, they're saying, yeah, I'm going to grow. But maybe a little bit more realistic perspective on what that growth might look like.
On the getting out, is that the operations going to not exist, or just the person taking the survey is going to get out?
For 88% of respondents, that's the same. So it's not, we ask the question about how much you'll be producing on your farm in 5 years. So whether the respondent thinks, okay, well, I'm getting out, but the farm's going to keep going, and they make that distinction in their mind, I don't know. When I take surveys, I don't think that hard, so I bet they don't. But by and large, I think this is representative of the operations. Good question. And thank you for shouting out your questions. I can't see anybody because of the light, so just shout them out. Don't raise your hand. So then what does that growth look like? How diversified are they going to be? So we ask this as 10 years from now, which is really unfair, because if I ask any of you in here about where your business is going to be 10 years from now, you're not going to have a good answer either. So once again, what we're really getting at here is what are people's mindsets around this, and the 10-year thing just says in the future, right? It's not a magic number at all. And we didn't have them specifically define what this diversification looks like. We just asked them for a category of where they thought they would be. So you can see large farms have a predisposition a little bit more towards diversity in the way that they think about their farms, but it's certainly not exclusive to them in terms of thinking about this. Just this morning, I was going through some of the data to find out, all right, is that diversification going to be, if you're a crop guy, are you going to grow other crops? Or does diversification look different than that? And for the most part, The actual diversification that they tell us in terms of acres or head in 5 years doesn't show a lot of switching. So I'm not exactly sure what that diversification looks like, but we did ask a question this time. This was new for this survey, asking this kind of in two ways. Where are the opportunities for your farm today? And so we asked this about their operation over the next 5 years. And several of these have different diversification options within them. And then we ask them also, how do you feel about your ability as a manager to take advantage of those opportunities? So what you're seeing up here in the blue is where they said their opportunities were. And no surprise, it's attached to what they believe makes their farm successful today, which is managing cost and efficiency. What's your ability to manage that? They feel like there's more room for them there. So their ability to achieve it gets less than the scope of the opportunity. Then managing risk. But notice the gap there isn't real wide. Expanding what they do now is their third area. So we got that, and they feel like, okay, I got that covered. Finding new markets for what they produce today represents an opportunity for them, and one of the biggest gaps in where their responses were. And I want you to keep that one in mind. We'll come back to that today a little bit at the end. And then growing my capabilities, and this is using knowledge, developing better skills, bringing more information in, bringing more people, relying more on experts, all go into that category of expanding their capabilities a little bit there. Government programs, they are way better at doing it than the opportunity if they chose to do so. Get out of my hair. And then new types of production, producing other things is far down the list, and moving into non-ag enterprises falls further down even than that. So we're pretty consistent here in that. When we look at the same thing with threats, how important are these threats, and how would you rank your ability to manage them? Market price risk is there. That volatility is, look at the size of that gap up there. It's a scary area. Now, again, particularly as we gathered this information in the first 6 months of this year, where that volatility and tariff conversations were all within that time frame, added to that. But still, not a huge surprise. We know that that's a difficult issue. It's the reason that area is the lowest level in the success factors. Regulations and policies, also a real threat, and big gaps there. And I know that that's something that ARA as an organization is playing a really important role in. Inflation, interest rates, temperature or climate issues, kind of a polarizing topic, but a big gap there. Even if somebody thinks they can do that, it's a big problem, there's limited perspective of what they can do about it. Labor issues came up a lot. We did some qualitative research on this, asking farmers, so what are the areas, what's at the top of your mind today? So not just thinking out 5 years, which things are you most worried about? And labor and succession issues both were really high on that list. So it's low on this list when we average it out across all farms, but that doesn't mean that it's not on the list. Resource scarcity down there, and then access to capital. Despite where markets are, farmers feel like they've got an ability to manage that fairly effectively. Because the gaps are so much bigger on the threats, I wanted just to go into a little bit more detail. So when we look at market price risk, was 7.2 in terms of the threat and 5.3 in their ability to deal with it. It is, even among large farms who theoretically have more resources to deal with those, the threat is bigger. Yes, their ability to manage it is slightly bigger, but it's almost the same gap. For large farms, regulations and policies also was big, just like it was for the average farmer, but when you move to lack of qualified labor, it is a major concern. For the commercial farms, same story, wider gap on market and price risk, wider gap on regulations and policies. They were more concerned about inflation than large farms were. For mid-sized farms, their perceptions were really similar to the large farms, just with wider gaps. And then they flipped. I'm sorry, they're similar to the commercial, but they flipped regulatory with inflation factors for those. The mid-sized farms are a challenge for us to gather the information from those groups. And I've got a slide here in a little bit to tell you just a little bit more about that, but we run into that a little bit when we break that out by crop or livestock category. So how do they make decisions? So the first question we ask is, what do you feel about various sources of information? So ag media, general business media, universities, manufacturers, dealers, retailers, bankers, farm groups, other farmers, field days, or social media. What do you think they said is most important? Trusted advisors. So, for all size farms, other farmers are the most important point. For large farms, it was highest. 68% of large farms put other farmers in the top 3. Not what I thought not the way I thought that would go. Now, one thing to keep in mind, what's the demographics of large farms? It's moved younger. And we have, for the last 20 years, made communication across the country easier than ever before. And we have now raising the 3rd generation to have that easy access. This is a bigger deal than it's ever been before. Ag media, also really important. First, particularly among, named first, so it was in the top 3 for almost everybody, but was ranked first for large and commercial farms. So ag media, still really relevant. We're one of the few industries where that is the case. Ag retailers and dealers, those trusted advisors, were 7th out of 10 for large farms. But really important, and we're 3rd most overall. So I don't want to downplay that in any way, and I'll double down on that statement a little bit later. But for about 40% of farmers, retailers and dealers were in the top 3. Manufacturers followed those, but the bigger the farm was, the more important manufacturers were, even though manufacturers were still down there in 4th or 5th. For large farms, field days, general business media at the bottom. Bankers didn't even show up. And you heard Downey tell you I was a banker for 15 years before I saw the light. So, yeah, so they don't even show up. So when we ask farmers how they make buying decisions, what do they look at? And we ask it in general first. What do you care about in general, regardless of the product? And we ask them to rank these 6 different topics. So the lower number is more important to them. So effectiveness, really important, most important to the large. So again, remember, lower number is most important. So most important to large, but most important to all farmers is performance. Price is a close second, particularly for the mid-size, but the gap is wider for large farms. Availability, we thought, would move up pretty dramatically. It was loosely, we can't make comparisons between survey years because they're different groups, different times. But for the most part, in past surveys, availability has been fourth, it's third now. And then brand, less important for large. Again, remember, bigger numbers means less important for large farms than it is for commercial or mid-size. The ability to handle those falls into that fourth category, and then the other category out of 6, what that tells you is almost nobody picked any other categories. They were happy just to rank those. When we ask about specific products, though, we can find out a little bit more about some of the trade-offs that they have to make. And I'm not showing a lot of livestock data here today. We have livestock data. We're not as far in the analysis with it. Actually, we thought we would start there, but so many of the livestock producer respondents also had crop that we decided that it made more sense to start there. So price performance trade-offs lead more towards performance and less toward price, the bigger the farm. That's kind of the way that is. So the trade-offs that we ask is you have price, you can have product or performance, or you can have relationships, service. How would you pick those? Put those in order for us. When we move to the crop side, you see some more differences. Fertilizer, not a surprise. Price matters most. Seed, also not a surprise. Performance matters most. For crop protection and for capital equipment, the smaller you are, the more you care about price. Not a surprise, right? It's where things are tight. If you are big, you have the luxury of focusing on performance. So then we ask, this is the second or third time we've asked this, do you make decisions by gut or do you do analysis? Now, when we ask this question, anytime you ask humans how they make decisions, they're going to project rationality because we're all rational in our own minds. So we know always that this will skew towards analytical decision making. And it does, but it's a wider distribution than most of us might give credit for. So we ask this on a scale of 1 to 9, 9 being analytical, 1 being completely analytical, and 1 being completely intuitive or by the gut. And so what you can see here is that the analyticals, so those who rank analytics as a 7, 8, or 9, are about half of farmers. About a third of farmers make their decisions primarily by gut. So again, we always know it will skew. When we ask retailers, what do you think those numbers would be? Pretty darn close. I thought that was really fascinating. I thought it might be a little bit more dispersed for retailers, but when you look across there's very few areas. There are more farmers who say they're analytical than retailers or dealers who project that on them, but on the average, it's pretty good. Larger farms actually are a bit more intuitive. They make a more balanced decision than commercial or mid-size. Not by a lot, but anytime you see a trend that's organized around size, that stands out a little bit. But the big gap was on education. So the more educated farmers are very analytical. 65% of educated farmers make their decisions. I don't know how they make their decisions. We didn't measure that. We asked them how they make decisions. So people who are educated told us that they make educated decisions. Probably not a surprise. I mean, they spent, a couple $100,000 on that education. They got to make sure it pays off. So it must pay off in how they make decisions. Actually, I'm being a little facetious. I really do think that that's true. When we look at this by size, it really does jump out. So you do see that there are a large group of those, when we break it out by just those three categories, the larger number of large farmers disappears and gets spread into some of the other numbers. But the large farms are highly analytical. Not a surprise. Okay, so what are they analyzing? So you say you're analytical. You could be analyzing performance. You could be analyzing price. You could be analyzing service, availability, all kinds of stuff that you could be looking at. So what do they look at? So this is kind of where we're headed with this research. It's a little bit of a sneak preview. So this is what we did here is we said, all right, so in our sample, 23% were large farms, 54% were commercial, 22% were mid-size. And we know that they have different perspectives about price, performance, and relationship. So when we combine those, what do we see in terms of how they're making decisions? So one thing that jumps out, first, there's a broad mix, okay? There's not a lot there that's like, oh, wow, duh, that's a really big number. Probably the biggest one is the large price buyers who are analytical. So what are those price guys looking at? If they're large, one of the main things they're looking at, even though performance is the main thing, they may be making their decisions in an ordered way. Meaning it may not be price or performance, it may be performance and then price. So I find out what I want to buy, and I want that decision to be made based on what's going to work the best. And then I'm really going to get my hands dirty shopping this thing to make sure I get the best price. And I think that's what we're seeing up there. Just hypothesis right now. I would have, if that were the nature of large farms, I would have seen that in other analytics. I don't see that as much. I would have thought that the performance large farms would have been more analytical than they are. But they're not. So, and then the thing about the relationship guys that I was mentioning, the relationship large farms, that number is so small. The relationship commercial farms, that number is so small. And the relationship mid-size farms are so small. I almost can say we don't have relationship buyers anymore. That doesn't mean relationship isn't important. It's just compared to the other things, it just barely even registers. When we started doing this survey, that was up closer to 20%. And now it's down to 4, 5, something like that. It is really low. The bulk of the market that's in that commercial space today, not very analytical on the price guys, so they're looking at something different. So maybe an important behavioral difference between large price guys and commercial price guys in terms of how they're making some of those decisions. The commercial price guys, only 18% of the market compared to the large price guys where that's 47%. That's a pretty big shift in some of those numbers. And when you look at the commercial guys, the price performance group are almost dead even in terms of how important both of those things are. So when you look at where this lies, so that middle column of numbers gives you a little sense of where the numbers of farms lie based on the data that we collected out of this. And again, mid-sized farms, there's not nearly as many of those, but you see a pretty strong mixed group in that tiny little relationship category. But again, those numbers are not big enough that I can feel very confident in sharing that. If I look at this by crop, and so I take that one step further and I say, okay, if you are a large, price-focused, analytical decision maker in corn, what does that look like compared to some of the others? And the chart gets too big here, so let me just give you a few little takeaways. So in general, price buyers aren't as analytical no matter the size of your crop. So that large crop group that I just showed you, they're a little bit of an anomaly across all different categories. If I look at the commercial corn, soy, wheat guys, they're pretty, they're not very analytical in corn, soy, wheat. So a little bit more price and a little bit more performance. There's more mid-sized price buyers in corn, soy, wheat than for cotton and fruit, nut, and vegetable. And I suspect it's commodities out, commodities in is kind of the perspective of that, where you get for the veg guys, it's a different matter there on the small side. Large cotton growers, very price focused. If you look at where cotton's been, that's a logical answer, although that would hold true for fruit, nut, vegetables as well. And then for both of those, the larger are a bit more price focused in those two crops, and smaller are more performance focused for those two categories of crops. We also look at loyalty, and we have over the last 5, I think, iterations of the survey, we've asked a lot of questions to try to understand farmer loyalty. We decided not to do that as much this time. And the reason why is for about the last 3 of those, there just wasn't much difference across different product categories in terms of the loyalty, okay? And often the sellers of some of those products are the same people, particularly on the crop side for seed. More and more farmers get their seed from the same place they get their crop protection, the same place they may get their fertilizer, not entirely, of course, but in that way. So this time we asked it only in one category. We ask it for seed, and we do a comparison. We ask them about loyalty to the brand, and we ask them about loyalty to the dealer or retailer. And partly we did that in seed because those are sometimes split in some categories. We ask this across 5 different ways. We ask them, how loyal do you see yourself to be? That's the very first question. And then we say, and so the research on loyalty says, if somebody is loyal, they'll tell somebody else about their pleasure with that brand or with that dealer. And so that's the 3rd level, or 2nd level there. And then we ask 2 other questions. If you could get a 5% discount, would you leave? Because it's one thing to say you're loyal, and it's another thing If you get a discount someplace else, how loyal are you? And then what if that were a 10% discount? So I switched that around just a little bit here because the leaving is different than the staying. Loyalty is staying. So I'm showing you here not those that would leave for a 5% discount, but how many would stay. So in that first question, asking about the loyalty. So at the top is their loyalty to the brand of seed, and at the bottom it's their loyalty to the dealer, and you can see this by size. So in general, about somewhere between 1/2 to 2/3 of farmers think of themselves as loyal. Whether their behavior demonstrates that or not, it's the mindset that they have for themselves. And that's significant because if they think of themselves as loyal, it's much harder to behave in a way that isn't loyal. It doesn't mean they won't, it just means it's cognitively harder for them to do that. I'm also showing you up here in red the responses we got from dealers and retailers. And so the brand loyalty perspective of dealers and retailers is much higher than the farmer perspective of loyalty, because 76% of dealer and retailer respondents said farmers would say they're loyal. After that, it's pretty darn good. So recommending it to others winds up being about 50%, and you can see there the behavior of the midsize in green and the behavior of the large in yellow when it comes to loyalty. They're more similar than the commercial guys in the middle, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Staying, would you switch your seed, or would you stay if you could get a 5% discount with another brand? No, 90% are going to stay. Would you stay at 10%? Now, so 2/3 roughly say they'll stay, and it doesn't really matter that much by size, even if they get a 10% discount. Now, this is just what they say. It is really hard for me to believe that there's not guys out there, more than 1/3 of guys out there wouldn't make decisions based on price at that level. And dealer and retailer respondents evidently agree with me there. 2/3 would stay, 1/3 would leave. When we move down to the dealer retailer level, more loyalty, more stated loyalty. Those liars. They say they're loyal, but then when you look at their behavior, they're not as loyal to the dealer as they are to the brand almost across the board. So I tease them. They're not lying at all, and these numbers are fairly close, but the recommendations come harder except for those large guys who talk to other farmers. Are they talking about brand? Yeah, but they're actually talking more than others about their dealer and retailer. You might want to be careful how we price, because they're going to talk about it. You know that. Would they stay for a 5%? 88% would. And again, 2/3 would stay even for 10%. The fifth question was, do you not buy branded seed? And I'm surprised at the 8 to 9% of large farmers who say they don't buy branded seed or buy seed from a dealer, but it may be because they are one. And that's how they interpreted that. When you actually choose those products, availability, price, effectiveness, I showed you this one already. That one had some big jumps when we look at that by size. You see those there. But I included that here because I wanted to give you what the retailer responses were for some of that. So effectiveness was the most important. These are rankings. And you can see if you look at retailer responses, the number 1 and number 2 are almost in a dead heat between effectiveness and price. And so when I moved back here, effectiveness and price do have an order to them, but they are pretty close. So that's a really positive response. And almost nothing else matters after that. And that's not quite true in the way that farmers looked at that, but there was really strong agreement at the dealer-retailer level about what some of those differences were. Availability did play a little bit bigger of a role there. And then the other qualities were non-product related qualities, didn't fare very well there at all. Brand doesn't seem to matter to a pretty large portion of this group, similarly to that group. How do you choose which dealer or retailer you'll work with? So a long list. We asked them, instead of having them rank a long list, we said, all right, give us your number 1, your number 2, and your number 3 along this list. Availability of brands, the quality and availability of technical expertise. So that's the trusted advisor piece on the technical side. Availability of services, digital data analytics services, which may get confounded a little bit with technical expertise, but sometimes goes together with that. The best price, offering financing, the convenience of the location, past experience, returns and warranties, quality of the services done, relationship with the salesperson, or billing statements and aspects of the transaction. So I'm not even going to show them all up here. Again, this is a ranking, so best price, at least they're consistent. Way down there in terms of what they want from the dealer. The product needs to perform, but the dealer needs to have a good price, particularly for large farms. But you'll notice both that and service quality, which was also really important, follow a pretty clear trend line. Large farms care about the quality of the service that they're receiving. Past experience was more important than I actually thought it might be. And then when I saw this, I'm like, well, yeah, if I've worked with somebody for 10 or 15 years, that matters. So I think they're kind of pulling loyalty within that, maybe more than actually the experience that they get with the dealer or retailer, maybe more the history. Next year, we'll probably want to try to add history to that. The relationship with the salesperson is the 4th out of that list of 10 or 11. Less important, you'll notice for the large farms, there's a big jump between the best price, service quality, and past experience up to relationship with the salesperson. And in fact, for the large farms, services, the services that are offered are more important to them than the relationship with the salesperson. That's the first time that's happened. Technical expertise, pardon my typo there, less important than past experience, but probably moving up. Convenience, which used to be one of the really big things in the early days of our study, almost doesn't even show up on the radar, particularly for the large guys. They're going to go a long way. Again, not a surprise probably to anybody here. When we look at retailers, dealers' response, look at how many said relationship with the salesperson was important. Let me just refresh where that is. It's 4th, and it is important. It's just not as important as retailers think it is to that. And it's all right. We're all built that way. But they get the important stuff, which is price is number 1, quality of service, past experience. They did add a little bit more there to financing. They probably missed a little bit on the availability of services from their list, but again, really close. So we have asked for most of our years of our study, we've asked some fundamental differences about how farmers see differences in the marketplace between different retailers. So the first is, do they see differences in services in the marketplace. The second is we ask them, is their relationship with the salesperson more important than their relationship with the dealer or retailer that they represent? We also asked, is there a difference in the information that they get, which is the last one up here. A new one for us this time is there a difference in terms of the number of new ideas for accomplishing your goals that you get out in the marketplace? And then the fourth one is how they feel about, do they know more about their input products they buy than the dealers or retailers? So when you look at this by size across this group, the relationship with salespeople is more important than the relationship with the company I have. This was not a ranking. And so what they're saying there is, yeah, salespeople are still pretty important unless you're large. And then the quality of services between different dealers and retailers matters, and they see it. So the last slide says it matters. This one says, and they can see differences in the marketplace. And they see differences in terms of the quality of information or technical advice that they get between those different suppliers. So in that second, differences in the quality and differences in the services, and then also in the third, in terms of new ideas, those are stacked by size. And those are small number differences, and that makes sense. Because frankly, in many markets, there's small numbers of differences in the marketplace. And so being able to observe those differences is kind of a big deal, even though those are small but significant numbers in between those. The good news is even large farms, only half say they know more, almost half of all farms say they know more about expendable products than the people who are serving them. Or if you're an optimist, you can view it the other way. Less than half view it that way. However you want. It's a toss-up between that. When we ask dealers and retailers, numbers are really on, except quality of the information and those service differences. So if there's a gap between the way dealers and retailers view farmers, they're small, but they're probably significant because they are in the service and information areas. Those are, if there's any kind of blind spot, that's probably it. So we have to then ask ourselves, so why? What would create those particular blind spots? Well, if our job as retailers or dealers is to sell products, they aren't blind spots. But if services and information are important, we have to be able to see it. And so my hypothesis there is that the complexity of products in the ag industry today and the number of SKUs dealer and retailer salespeople have to deal with means they can't be experts at everything. And so the information piece is scary, and most of our focus is on communicating what we know about products. And there's more opportunities. And it's not the sky is falling. It's not an indictment by any stretch. I guess I would say, I think that's an opportunity. When we look at these different sources of information, I showed you some of these earlier and told you other farmers really jump out, and I showed you this I gave you some size information on there even. But there's a big gap between dealers and retailers as sources of information compared to all the other ones that are on there. And so that's why I think it's an opportunity, because we are seen as an important source. We are that of information. That information is seen as valuable, and it's seen as a differentiator in the marketplace. And so I just wanted you to see it in that way. One maybe thing to think about is field days or shows goes pretty far down on the list as a source of information. What I would, again, hypothesize is that field days are opportunities for us as dealers or retailers more than they are as sources of information for farmers. So even though they may not see it as a source of information, it's still an important touch point. So just a few other little takeaways on that. This may be a duplicate, I can't even remember between that. So some takeaways. I showed you these opportunities and the ability to manage them. Every area up there that's a gap, I think, is an important takeaway for us as we think about our business and what we do. I think every one of those areas, managing risk, not improving efficiency or lowering cost, this is, I think, the most important one for us to focus on. Many commodities are really, margins are really compressed. They're compressed for us. But the opportunity is, how do we not make farmers more efficient, but help farmers be more efficient? Getting into the weeds of what's happening on the farm, and it requires a lot of trust to get there. But they're saying, even the large ones gave a big gap there. And so there's more for us to do. Yeah, we can focus on our own efficiency, our speed, our path to the market, our serviceability, and those are important things. But helping farmers be better at what they do on the farm, not the crop. The crop is taken care of. It's the farm that we can focus a bit more on. Expanding more in production, they feel like they've got covered. But finding new markets, do we play a role in helping them do that? Could there be a role? Some of the most innovative companies today are crossing boundaries between what traditional companies do. And the one, and they've gotten some criticism for it rightly, but the example of this is Elanco going to companies like Hershey and General Mills and saying, you all signal to the public you've got sustainability requirements. Why don't you help us pay farmers to be more sustainable so that you can meet your goals? It's an example of creating new ways of doing things. It's not foolproof. Carbon markets are a mess. How you define sustainability is not well defined in many places, but it's still an example of how can we help farmers deal with those issues. If they solve them on their own, they won't need us for it, which is true for every item up there. And the bigger they are, the more opportunity they have to find solutions to these things themselves. The more expertise they have, the more staff they can put towards it, the more risk they can take if they've managed their finances well. Similarly, on the threats, market and price risk is not a small thing. We don't have to come up with the solution and sell it. The days when the answer was the most important part of what we brought are diminishing. And our task becomes more about how do we work together to solve problems rather than selling the solutions that we've come up with on our own. Those are really tight markets where we've come up with solutions and sold them. They're extremely competitive and margins compressed, but the opportunities to connect and develop new innovations within this space is written all over this data. Retail plays a critical role. It doesn't, farmers are really clear about this. Retail is not going away, nor should it. we play a valuable role, but there's more we can do. I told you that I do research also on what makes good salespeople in agriculture. And this research, I asked several questions. We finished it last fall and did the analysis the first part of this year. One of the questions I asked was, does the 80-20 rule still apply? And almost every salesperson said, no, it's not 80-20, but it is 75-25. 75% of my business comes from 25% of my customers. And we ask about how many customers do you actually have? Not how many people buy stuff from you, but how many real customers? And in our industry, at the ag retail level, it was about 100. So 75% of our business comes from 25% of our farms. Or, for most salespeople, the bulk of their business comes from about 25 relationships. Then we asked, how much of the revenue you generate as a salesperson comes from your top 3 customers? And almost across the board, it was 50%. So let's think about this. That means we're in a business for which 50% of the business comes from 3 customers, 22% of the business comes from the next 22 customers, and 25% of our business comes from that bottom 75. And we have opportunities to grow. They're probably not going to be in the top 3. Those are ones we're going to try to maintain. Maybe some of the 22 could move up into that top 3, and maybe it's worth our time to try to make that happen. But what I suspect is, hidden within that bottom 75 is the next 17%er. 50% divided by the top 3, those are roughly 17% each. We have to get better at managing the portfolio of farmers we serve because it's already consolidated. And that requires different tools. To serve those top 3, we're not selling. That's account management. It's an entirely different activity. Not that it doesn't generate sales, it absolutely does. But it requires deep knowledge, deep trust, and a whole lot of time. That next 22, those are selling. We're actively selling. For that bottom 75, those are marketing. And I gotta think there's a portion of those that at some point we can't afford to put a salesperson on every one of those farms. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't serve those farms. It means we've got to figure out how do we do our job more efficiently in the sales area. And that's the innovation around services and business approaches that's going to be required for us. We've got to be more formal with that sector of large farms. We look at large farms not because they're more important than the commercial or mid-sized farms. We look at large farms because we recognized early on that the behaviors of large farms predicted the coming behaviors of the commercial and mid-sized farms. So our ability to understand how those large farms are unique and how they're moving, I think is incumbent on all of us, and the best sources of that information are in the field. As retailers and dealers, you are the shepherds of that knowledge of those opportunities. You are the folks who can do something about helping make change, helping make sure that we can continue to farm as we always have in a way that continues to protect small towns that define what our country is. And it is an existential mission for all of us. I hope that you'll grab sight of this. I hope we'll see you in January, or some of your people in January in Arizona, so we can really dig into, okay, what do we do with all of this information? I'm really grateful to ARA for allowing us to spend some time with you, and particularly grateful for all of you in this room. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you being here, Scott. Really appreciate it. I know I've got a lot of questions and we run right up against our time limit. What's your travel schedule?
I got a few minutes.
Okay, so you'll be around?
I'll be up here. Come on up.
Okay, sounds good. So just a couple of housekeeping things. We got a 30-minute break right now out in the lobby. So be sure to do that. Then we've got 2 breakouts right behind that. One on AI, one on fertilizer outlook. I look forward to seeing how that kind of switches up. And then we have a CEU form right back here that you can sign if you want CEUs. Okay? Thank you so much. Come up here with your questions for Scott.